conversation gladly, and I'm hoping oh so badly you could show me who is Scott Daddy.
Hey, welcome everybody. Today, my guest her name is Maayan, and we are going to be talking about her practices in the Jewish faith, as well as maybe some of her other spiritual beliefs as well. Welcome, Maayan. How's it going?
Good, how are you?
Doing well. Thank you for coming on, by the way. Really appreciate it.
Yeah.
And a couple things before we get going here. I just want to remind everybody that anyone is welcome to this Discord community. I say it all the time, but my number one goal is to just make a community of people online here that agree, disagree about all sorts of different things, and just a place we can come and talk about it. So yeah, other than that, just remember all the YouTube stuff. If you like the channel, if you support it, just remember to share it out and like. So anyway, Mayan, I think if we could start by just getting kind of a background of your religious upbringing and where you currently are now.
Yeah, absolutely. So, little bit about myself. I'm born and raised in Oklahoma. I currently live in Utah now, kind of moved out of that area, but I was raised in conservative Judaism. There are four different, I guess, types of Judaism. The most traditional is going to be Orthodox. A step up from that is conservative, which is where I was raised in. And then you go to Reform Judaism. It's a little bit more progressive, and then secular is so like a little bit above that from my understanding. I don't know a whole lot about that. Like I said, I'm most familiar with conservative Judaism. So there are two ways you can be Jewish. You can be Jewish by blood or by like conversion. So, but neither of my parents were Jewish. They both converted to Judaism before I was born. My mother converted from, I think she was raised more like Greek Orthodox because she's Russian. That whole side of my family is from Russia. They were not Jewish or anything like that, but she found Judaism for its spiritual beliefs and the Kabbalah, which we'll kind of get into a little bit later. Um, she loved that. She spent a year studying with a rabbi and then converted to Judaism while she was living in Israel. My father did the same thing. He is from Oklahoma. His family is Catholic. He converted to Judaism and moved to Israel, and that's kind of where they met pretty much. But because they both converted before I was born, that in the eyes of Judaism makes me Jewish just without having to be kind of converted into the religion.
Yeah.
So they left Israel, came back to Oklahoma. Like I said, that's where I was from. I went to a private Jewish school until I was about 12. Super small because in Oklahoma there's not a whole lot of Jewish people. So
Yeah.
I grew up there. I was really involved with my synagogue. I probably went to services at least anywhere from 1 to 3 times a week until I was about 12. I've had my bat mitzvah in Israel. I studied Hebrew for the first 12 years of my life. I practiced a lot of traditional Jewish practices. I kept kosher my whole life. I read the Torah, like the whole everything. And then that's kind of how I grew up. Sorry if you had something you were
No,
gonna ask.
I'm writing things down because I have a lot. I'm very ignorant to Judaism, so
Yeah,
I
good.
I'm good listening to a lot of it.
So Judaism, it's interesting because it is a closed religion. It's one of the only religions that don't outwardly go out of their way to convert people to it. Now, anyone's welcome to convert. It's a long process, but because we don't really go out and try to convert people, a lot of our beliefs and customs aren't really like, I don't want to say like shoved in people's faces because other religions kind of tend to be like that. But um, it's just, you definitely have to go looking for that information or talk to somebody. But yeah, so kind of getting into how I grew up. Once I was around 12, like I said, I had my bat mitzvah. I then moved into public school, and I guess from then my religion was kind of more in my hands of, if I wanted to continue practicing. My mother definitely gave me the choice of like you can keep going or, you can do your own thing because she's very open-minded. She like I said, she's more on the spiritual aspect than um I guess a religion. I don't know, they're hand in hand. But anyways, so from then I kind of took a couple years away just because of personal life stuff and things I was going through, and I was very, I guess, just angry and just struggling with my own beliefs. But once I got into high school, I joined my Jewish youth group. It was an international Jewish youth group. It definitely reconnected me to like my roots of where I grew up. We did a lot of spiritual practices, which I can kind of get into more depth
Yeah.
about that later. Um, and then I kind of definitely found myself again within Judaism, but as I left high school and I became kind of like living on my own when I was 18, I was kind of in college doing my own thing. That's when I really started to dig deeper into the spiritual aspect of Judaism. And then that kind of took me into a different direction. Now, I still technically consider myself Jewish. Well, I am because like I said, once you're born into the religion, it's a closed religion. I guess I could technically, I think, like denounce it, but like it's a part of me. So I am Jewish and I accept that. And it's definitely a part of my identity. But as far as like my belief system, it's very influenced by Judaism, but it definitely takes into account a lot more than just that. A lot of practices from some like pagan religions, I guess beliefs, not religions. Just kind of a lot to do with the occult, and then Eastern spiritual beliefs. Kind of, it's kind of all over the place. So,
Kind of
um,
melting your pot all together
yeah,
from tons of different things, huh?
yeah. Because I mean, like when it comes down to it, everyone's belief is, it's the way I was raised is, I can't judge someone for their belief system or what their relationship with God or whatever they consider as God. That's their business and like their thing. And I may believe something very different from a lot of people, and that's okay. I'm not really concerned about that. I'm just kind of, like I said, doing my own thing. It makes me happy. It's how I base who I want to be. Um, just yeah.
Yeah. Well, so would you say you don't necessarily like really practice any of the Jewish traditions anymore? You kind of just do your own spiritual thing, whatever feels best to you?
Yeah, I would say that when I can, it's really hard just because I don't live in the city I grew up in anymore, and I'm newer to Salt Lake City, so I'm not super familiar with the Jewish community here, and like I haven't spent time kind of going to synagogue or anything. It's definitely something I want to get back into just because I've been away from my synagogue, but when I can, I like to celebrate Jewish holidays. Um, like I said, there's customs and practices that um, I did daily growing up that I still like keep in my mind, and I um, definitely, I would say I practice kind of. It's a lot of like just like mindfulness and like being
Hmm.
appreciative of certain things, and like I wouldn't say I necessarily pray anymore. It's more of something I'm more of a meditate person.
And
But
they're almost really one and the same thing. I feel like they kind
yeah,
of have
yeah.
the same effect.
I'm
Uh,
always like hesitant to say that because I'm always afraid of like, not afraid, but just I don't want to, I guess, offend anyone, or it can be confusing for people who are closed-minded and are very stuck in like, oh, my way is the right way. And there's people I've mentioned to in the past like, oh, prayer and meditation and manifestation, it's all like it's really the same thing. It's just what you want to call it. um
yeah. So
yeah.
I guess if you don't mind, I'm just curious kind of how the weekly practices look like. So, because a lot of us here are ex-Christians or still Christians. Like I was raised Mormon. Um,
Hmm.
I don't know if Azari told you much about me. I'm now, I guess, consider myself an atheist, but I believe in like kind of like objective purpose and morality and stuff. So I'm just curious, like, what the weekly practice looks like. Like, is there a like Sunday school kind of like what Christians do? Like, what all do you do?
So, this won't really be applicable to my life now because I don't necessarily practice these. But growing up, definitely went to Sunday school. There was I can't remember. I want to say it's Tuesdays or Wednesdays that my specific synagogue had evening services to honor anyone that has passed, like a weekly memorial. It's like a super quick service. It's like 10, like I want to say 15 minutes. Friday nights is the beginning of Shabbat, so Friday night to Saturday night. That was something I practiced, like I said, for the first 12 years of my life, where depending on like, which section of Judaism you grew up on depends on how serious you take it. So in conservative Judaism, we would always, of course, pray over all of our meals, light candles, sing blessings. I would go to services for that. And then Saturday is supposed to be the day of rest where we don't go to work. You can go to services. There are day services. It's definitely very optional. And like I said, I grew up in conservative Judaism, and people hear that and they think that it's very strict. While, like, yes and no, there's a big aspect of not judging someone else for how involved they are. So it's like everything was very optional. So you in our community, at least that I grew up in, I can't say the same for all because I don't have experience in all other communities, but growing up in a traditional conservative Jewish synagogue, there was never any like, oh, you're not going to services every week, like how bad of you, or you're not practicing Shabbat. There were Jewish people in my synagogue who didn't even keep kosher. And
Mm.
are you familiar with what kosher is? It's like a way of
Yeah,
eating
yeah.
certain food can and can't eat. There just was not a whole lot of there never really was any judgment for like how involved you are. There's people that went to services every day, some that would come a couple times a year, and they were always welcomed and appreciated as much as everyone. And I know a lot of people say that they have that experience at their place of worship, but I can definitely say that um, in my synagogue, there was no room for judgment for anyone who did not practice or um, it's just kind of whoever
Yeah.
can come. Um, there's the Shabbat, Sunday services. There's technically services every day of the week. It's kind of just like whenever you would like to go. There's different things every week. I know in my Jewish school, we had services in the school, like the actual school, not the synagogue that I would go to. On Tuesdays and Thursday mornings, we would do our daily prayers, and everything was always done in Hebrew. And then we would read the portions of the Torah. So the reason there's so many services in every week, Shabbat services or Sunday services, is because technically in Judaism, it's like you're supposed to be reading the Torah every year throughout the year. So each service is reading a portion of that Torah, which is the Old Testament, I guess, to Christians. That's what they look at it as. So
Okay.
we read that throughout the year, every year. So when I was practicing, we read like our weekly portions. So we would talk about it. We would always discuss it in class. So like I was still going to like elementary school, but even so young, like we would discuss these stories of the Torah, and it was like super in depth. And we would always be taught to like question. Um, the choices made in those portions, what the moral teachings are, how we should implement them into our lives, stuff like that.
You were taught to question like the decisions that the
Yeah.
ancient Hebrews were making and stuff?
Yeah. So a lot of beliefs that are taught to like young Jewish kids is a lot of critical thinking and just really just trying to understand, I guess, why things are the way that they are in the past and how they are applicable to the future. Because there's always, I don't know if you've ever heard jokes about like the Jewish rabbis, they're always questioning and always arguing with each other, and like there's always just this circle of like questions going around. It's we're really taught to kind of, I guess, check each other, make
Yeah.
sure that there's no like, I guess, problems
That's
with
super
power.
cool. Like that's like what
Yeah.
I'm all about. Like I think that's so important to, like, critically think and question things. So that's awesome that
Yeah,
they taught you that.
my favorite thing, as a kid, there was this book that we used every week. It was called "You Be the Judge." It's very silly. So there would be references to Torah portions and like situations and like these stories that would happen. Um, it was something super simple because it's for kids. So it would be like you're at the beach, you're alone, and there's a dog drowning and a person drowning, and you only have one lifeboat. Like, who do you save and why? And then you're supposed to like discuss it with the class, and like we would all go around and share like what we thought. It would be like, okay, well, is it your dog? Is it someone else's dog? Who is this person? Have they
Yeah.
hurt somebody? Like, are they a good person? Are they a bad person? And like we're taught to think through these things like so young. And then we kind of like are supposed to make a unanimous decision, and then after that they read into what the rabbis and the Torah teachings would say, and then we would compare it to like what we thought and we believed, and there was never any like punishment or wrong answer and stuff. It was really just supposed to be for us to learn
Wow.
kind of how to gauge our morals and like how we should um, do that. And it also just talks about like the value of life a lot. I remember there was one where it was kind of sounds crazy because it sounds like a lot for a kid. But there is like, um, someone is threatening to like kill you if you don't denounce your religion, blah blah blah. It's like, what do you do in that moment? And it's really interesting because I've heard this exact question asked to other religious people, and it shocks me every time that I hear from other religions that they're like, stand by your religion. But like in
Yeah.
Judaism, it's taught to like your life is worth a lot, and you
Wow.
only get one, and like you should really protect your life at all costs, and well, not at all costs, not at the expense of other people. And so it goes into like most rabbis and most Torah teachings would actually suggest in that moment just take a step back and just say yes, like I denounce it, and that you will have time to repent for that sin, and then you'll be forgiven, and then you can kind of reinitiate yourself back into that religion. And something super beautiful that I was taught a lot as a kid um, was that um, just like how we gauge what's right and what's wrong, and like using the teachings of the Torah and then also our modern practices, because there's also the understanding of like the Old Testament, which is the Torah, was written so long ago, and it was from a different world and a different time. A lot of Jewish people who don't keep kosher, they have the same belief as me. Where at the time where certain things that we were told not to eat, don't eat that, that's bad. It's not necessarily that it's a sin. It's at that time, there was no good, clean way to like, I guess, safely eat that food. Or
Yeah.
there's like a thing. Sorry, I know I'm like kind of trailing off into like eating kosher now, but it just kind of goes back to like just a glimpse of like the type of stuff that we'd be talking about and like
Yeah.
discussing a lot as kids. So there's an aspect of keeping kosher where you're not supposed to eat meat and dairy together. Well, the original script of that says don't boil the calf in the mother's milk, and that was written at a time where most people had family farms. And the reason we didn't eat meat and dairy together is because oftentimes the milk that we would have would be from the same family of like the animal you're eating, and it's like morally wrong to do that, because just be respectful of the animals you've killed and don't like eat the family together.
Yeah.
But that got translated to, oh, don't eat meat and dairy together. So there's a lot of
Right.
people that still eat kosher, who maybe realize that, okay, well, that was written for that time, but since it's been a practice for this long, I'm going to still keep doing it. But a lot of us are constantly reminded of those readings and kind of asked for ourselves, like, okay, do I believe this? Do I not? Do I want to keep doing it because I believe it's right? It's a lot of questioning, and it was very
Honestly,
open.
sorry to interject here,
No,
but
you're fine.
it sounds so much like philosophy, and like I'm going to school right now for philosophy, and so a lot of these things like the moral dilemma you guys would talk about as kids, like that's something that philosophers use all the time, that type of
Hmm.
hypothetical. So it's really cool. Like yeah, I never would have known any different that
Yeah.
that's the type of things you guys would learn. I imagine like orthodoxy isn't quite the same, and it's a bit more strict, isn't it? And like, no, these are the teachings, this is what we follow, right?
Yeah. So Orthodox Judaism is going to be it's really different. I think it's a really beautiful way of life, even as someone who is very progressive, because I've actually been inside of Orthodox communities. They very, very much keep to themselves. They only really leave their community if there's like supplies that they need or like they need to go like get food or whatever. I've been to an Orthodox community who is, for the most part, super self sufficient, very much kind of like off the grid living. They're like a community of them. Now they still like leave every so often. This was in like Pennsylvania that I went and visited this place. And I talked to those people there and um genuinely like a lot of their teachings, it's very even though there's some differences in like what men and women are allowed to do, it's like the level of restrictions on each of them are very even, and they're very,
Mm,
like I guess the rules and things that are expected of both of them are very, like, one there's not more expected of women than men, and they just have it's just kind of, like, different things that they would do. I'm sorry, I'm struggling with my words right now.
no,
It's
no.
not men and women aren't supposed to touch before they're married. Everything is separated by gender. And like, I've been in services where it is split down the middle. Like, you can't even see on the other side the men and women, because we're supposed to like be with like our sisters, and then the men are like they're with their brothers and stuff. And I remember I went to an Orthodox service, and it was one of the most like moving and uplifting services I had been to. I just all
Hmm.
the women we were all dancing together on the other side and singing in Hebrew, and it felt very free. Um, and I definitely see a lot of benefits to living the way that they do. It is very much by the book, not as well. They still discuss things. It's kind of hard. It's like
Yeah,
they're all like super aware. Like they're not like closed off from like other aspects of Judaism. Like they definitely believe for the most part like I think this is right. I think this is what I should be doing, and it's like their choice, and they're very aware of their options, and um, it's just very free. Like there, no one has to like stay in it. It's not like you have to like break out and leave, kind of like Amish, like people.
yeah.
It's the first thing I, but
So
yeah.
you, I guess maybe you didn't notice or anything, and like I said, I'm very ignorant to all of this. I know what fundamentalism looks like just because it exists like in all religions. Like, there's Christian fundamentalists, there's
Mhm.
there's LDS fundamentalists here in Utah that are like still practicing polygamy. They're have compounds and stuff. So
Yeah.
the way you talked about it sounded like it to you, at least, it felt very equal. Um so do you think there are any women in like Orthodox traditions that ever feel like maybe they aren't being treated correctly? Or I know I've seen like a few stories here and there of like women who left because they just didn't like the way things
Yeah.
were going. And so yeah, I'm just
Yeah.
curious what you think.
It's definitely, I would say, it's different for per community because I've seen a couple, and there are some differences, and I think it's really just the teachings can be the same, but people can be different. And there are probably are cases where there are bad people in those Orthodox communities that do want to take advantage of the system. For example, when I said that there's like, I feel like it's pretty equal, it's more of like there are certain things that women can't do that men can. And then there's also certain things that only women can do and men can't. And I remember there's even something in conservative Judaism that I used to question when I was a kid. So I'm gonna go back to that, but I'm like tying it back into kind of what you asked.
Yeah.
Um, so in conservative Judaism, I'm pretty sure I so there women can't be rabbis, and it's the same thing with Orthodox, as women cannot be rabbis or cantors. In Reform Judaism, they can, but in the section of Judaism that I grew up in, I noticed that, and I remember I questioned because I asked my rabbi, I'm like, why can't women do that? And So a big reason, I don't know if this is the same for Orthodox. Like I said, I'm not the most educated. I definitely have more of like an outside perspective because I only visited for short periods of time. But the reason that in conservative Judaism, or one of the reasons why women are not able to be rabbis, is because the rabbis are the ones that handle the Torah specifically, like the physical Torah. And I don't know if you've ever seen one. They're really big.
Mm-mm.
Um, yeah, I don't know if they have like a bunch of metal dressings on them and stuff, and they are opening it, and like it's a very, very particular thing to do. And if you drop it or mishandle it, um, I like in our teachings, you're supposed to fast for like, I want to say it's like 60 or 90 days.
Wow.
Um, and they don't believe that a woman should be subject to do that. And so that's kind
Mm.
of where they started leaning towards only men are rabbis. So it's like when you hear the reasoning, it's like, oh, this isn't out of like a, oh, you don't deserve to handle the Torah. It's like a, we want to protect you from having to deal with that if that comes up. So, um,
Interesting.
yeah, I thought that was really interesting. Like, unless like the rabbi totally lied to me to make me feel better,
Just to make you
but
feel better.
I'm I know. I'm pretty positive because I've heard that from a couple other people too. Is like, and I technically, if that ever does happen, like the community can all join in and like spread it apart, like across multiple different people. Like if 60 people decided to like help the person who like accidentally dropped it, like, oh well, I'll fast for a day to make up for it. Like I think technically that can work. Because I asked about that too. I was like, how is even a person gonna fast for 60 days? So,
Yeah.
there's like, yeah, there's, oh my gosh, there's so many teachings in the Torah, and then like revisions done by like other rabbis, and like, oh my gosh, there's just so much.
Well, it's pretty cool. It kind of seems like it's really built around just traditions of your ancestors and
Yeah.
how can we continue these traditions forward, but also, you know, develop in our modern age and whatnot. So it's pretty cool. I kind of wanted to ask about, so because you said there was kind of like four main versions, I guess: orthodoxy, conservative. What was the third one?
Reform is
Reform, and
the
then
one above.
secular.
Yeah, I don't know if I don't know if they actually technically, I want to say secular is like the people that are Jewish but don't practice. Like
Well,
they're like, "Oh, I'm born Jewish and like I'll claim it, but
right.
like I don't really do it." Like I don't know a whole lot about that. I've just heard that term be thrown around while talking about Orthodox, conservative, and reform and all that. So in my city
Okay.
was also a reform. They were called a temple. Um, so we were like a conservative synagogue. They were a reform temple. Honestly, the biggest difference I can note is they had female cantors. I think they had a female rabbi for I'm not totally sure. I think it's like it's a different structure of the people who like you go to in that synagogue, and then everything's in English versus where I was from, everything was in Hebrew.
Okay.
And we had a lot longer services. We had, at least from my experience, I just never really went to the reform one because we really liked practicing the traditional stuff. And honestly, even as a kid, when I would visit the ones and we'd sing in Hebrew, I just didn't feel as like connected as if I was doing it in, or when I was speaking in English, I didn't feel as connected as when I would do it in Hebrew. So
Oh, that's
I
interesting.
yeah.
So, and this is probably a dumb question because I think I know the answer, but conservative is just implying like that's just relating to the religion itself. So
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
well,
there's
I'm
it's not like
curious
it
if
has
like
nothing to
you
do with
were,
political.
yeah, yeah.
No, actually, it's so funny. Even in my quote conservative Judaism upbringing, most of almost everyone in my synagogue are like on the political spectrum, like pretty leftist. Like
Hmm.
from my experience, like because there's another huge thing of Judaism that is taught as when we're so young, like when we're going back and forth on moral teachings and all that stuff. There is a it's not a practice. I don't know what it's technically. It's tikkun olam, which is like repairing the world. And a really, really high belief for most Jews is standing up for people that are oppressed. and doing volunteer work and basically just like helping your neighbor pretty much. So starting at that fundamental level of like, oh, we need to be standing up for people that are being bullied or being like just oppressed at all. We need to be on their
Yeah.
side. We need to be their advocates, even if they're not Jewish, even if they hate God and they denounce them, if they are put in a place where their system of like leadership is oppressing them, you should stand up for them. So, growing up, I've always been very involved with like, I guess, current events. As a young child, I would definitely be like very aware of like women's marches and like advocating for equality for all
Yeah.
people whether in any religion. So it's really progressive. Like, don't get the conservative Judaism switched up. And I mean, there were definitely like, I would say, like, some right-leaning Jewish people in there, but, like, even then, everyone knew to kinda, like, leave that out of the synagogue, and it was
Mm.
very, very looked upon if you kinda brought that in because, even our teachings would really align with, like, doing what's best for the majority of people, and,
Yeah.
so that's a like, I was doing volunteer work as a child all the time. Like, I would go, into our low income schools and like help make meals for kids my age. We would run donation drives. I remember as a teenager, I worked with a local place that supported teen moms that had children or were expecting and who were like cast out from their families and like living in shelters and stuff. Like, we did a lot of work that would, I guess, typically in like politically conservative homes not be looked at
Yeah.
very, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
we were really progressive and very most
Well,
most Jewish people are gonna be more left leaning for sure.
it's pretty interesting because, like, there's a lot of right wing people who have a lot of hatred, and they hate progress too.
Yeah.
And just for you, just so you know, like, I'm pretty progressive myself. I also think we should like raise up all types of people and the downtrodden and everything like that. And interestingly enough, the Jesus for Christians teaches us the same thing. So
Yeah,
seems
you would
twisted that they,
say that
yeah,
also. Yeah.
yeah. But
Uh,
anyway, it's interesting because it seems like there is a connection, and like what the right wing hates about certain people, I guess, is that, you said a lot of you guys tend to be pretty progressive and like leftist and whatnot, and I know like they'll say that people like have a connection. Sorry, I'm trying to be very like cryptic because I don't want to be offensive or anything. Plus, we're
oh
on
yeah. No,
YouTube,
for
but
sure.
I'm sure you understand what I'm getting at. Like, they run all these wild conspiracy about Jewish people, right?
Oh yeah.
And
Oh my gosh. Well, a lot of that's rooted in like um so anti-Semitism goes way back. I mean, it's not necessarily an inherently like traditional like American conservative. I'm sorry, I'm trying not to get like super political. Um, but like the original like conservative beliefs are like nowhere near where they are now, genuinely. Like,
yeah,
or like right like I guess you can say like Republican like right wing stuff. A lot of what we're seeing in other states and in the media um is just a lot of, oh my gosh, what's the word? It's not like propaganda, but like it's a lot of beliefs that are so deeply rooted back from like when Nazi Germany was like
right,
obviously doing their thing over there. A lot of that mentality and these like hateful rhetorics and stuff spread like wildfire, like not only in just in Europe, but like into America for sure. And
right,
um, I believe that it just kind of definitely took a new face and was a lot more quiet, but now we're in a time where people feel more comfortable being hateful, and so that's where we're seeing
right.
that
Yeah,
come back. In
I
reality, the fundamentals are like way different and it's really sucks.
Yeah, sorry, I keep cutting you off, but
Oh,
I
you're totally fine.
I think like part of what I was trying to get at is that the things that those right wing people will say about Jewish people, I think are good things that you guys do. And like I think it's somewhat true. Like they do say like, oh, like, you know, they're pushing some trans agenda or whatever. And like honestly, back in the 1930s in Germany, one of the first things the Nazis shut down was gender research and sex research. And so
Yeah.
it's pretty scary the kind of matching vibes we have right now compared 100 years later.
Yeah.
Um,
And I mean, this is what happens when you don't teach history, you know? It's like
yeah,
things repeat. And I did a lot of um studying on like anything honestly related to World War II and just Nazi Germany, just from growing up Jewish and like being highly educated about the Holocaust and all that. It came with learning about all that other stuff. And so for me, I've seen it. I remember as like a teenager, I'd be like, yo, guys, this is like really bad. Like this thing that these people are saying are like really
yeah,
bad. Like this is from this, and my friends would be like, "Oh, what are you talking about?" You know, like, and you know, these people that haven't studied that in depth, and I'm like, I don't know. Let's definitely watch out for it. And then here we
yeah.
are, like years, and it's very prevalent. And people are very comfortable.
That's crazy
It
you
just,
noticed it that early, because yeah, I mean,
oh
even
yeah,
for myself, I feel like I only became super aware of fascism in our country like maybe 3 years ago.
yeah. No, I remember in middle school, I kind of started to pay attention to some of the political stuff that was happening in America. But also, I mean, like growing up Jewish in Oklahoma, dear God, I mean that's like right in the Bible Belt, and I mean
Yeah,
I've dealt with a lot of really awesome um Christian people and people of all different Christian denominations, but I've also run into some very hateful people. And I
right.
mean, like my dog would get like bomb threats, death threats. Like
Dang.
we'd have like at my Jewish school, we would have to do practice like oh, what's the like evacuations and stuff for like we would get like bomb threats and stuff because people are just crazy over
That's
there.
crazy. I
So
don't want to
I've
go.
been very yeah. Oh
Sorry,
no,
I
sorry,
just
we're
like I wasn't planning on talking too much about politics, but it just happened
yeah.
and
Yeah.
I
I
have so many
unfortunately
questions for you, honestly,
yeah.
like and I want to be
Yeah.
respectful of your time. I didn't even ask how long you were okay to stay here, but
Oh, it's okay. I mean, we can go over an hour if it's okay with you. I
okay,
know I've
yeah.
talked a lot. Yeah.
So yeah, I kind of wanted to ask cuz you brought up being around Christians and stuff. Um I in the Torah it it does talk about like a Messiah eventually, right? And basically you
Yeah.
guys just don't think that he's come yet.
Yeah, pretty much. When it gets into that kind of stuff, not gonna lie, I do not remember and did not pay a whole lot of attention when I was younger to that
Yeah,
stuff. But I do know that, like, yeah, so in, well, Jesus was like a Jewish rabbi, you know,
right.
so we kind of just like, oh yeah, that guy.
So he's like an old rabbi to you guys. You accept that
Yeah,
he like taught people and
yeah, like
yeah,
great guy, cool
right.
belief.
Great guy. So did you ever have Christians in Oklahoma like really trying to evangelize and give you all the evidence
Oh
like
yeah.
why Jesus for sure resurrected and all this stuff?
Oh yeah. I mean, I've had everything from like, oh, you should come to my church service to like, you Jewish people are the reason Jesus is dead, and like
Damn. Oh my
everything.
god.
I have been around a lot of different people. Honestly, non-denominational Christians have been like definitely the nicest to me. Um, but Yeah, definitely just weird vibes sometimes
Yeah.
whenever like I just stopped really like telling people I was Jewish over there just because most people were like really Christian and like as soon as they would hear that, they'd be like, "Have you ever been baptized? Would you like to come to my church?" And I'm like, "Okay, come on." Like I mean, I would go with my friends that were Christian to their churches. I believe in like,
Hmm.
being open to that stuff and like I'd have a good time. And then sometimes people would really not leave me alone about converting. And so I've not had the greatest experience
Yeah.
with some of them, not all. I still have friends that are close to me or who are Christian and I'm a big advocate for like, any religion that gives you a sense of community and like will help you with your morals and like give you direction and like what to believe. It's really comforting. It's like really good for a lot of people. It
Yeah.
just sucks when it gets into crossing other people's religious boundaries because that's something I was always taught as a kid. Like, hey, there's people that are not Jewish and you're
Right.
not better than them and just because they don't believe what you believe, like no one's better than each other. You should respect their beliefs and not go out of your way to like convert them. Like it's like if they want to be Jewish, they can, but that's up to
Yeah.
them. So there's a lot of respect for people's boundaries in Judaism.
So I'm curious, and if this is too personal, that's fine. But I'm curious, because you said your parents both converted. Um, did their families like think that was weird? Did they treat them any differently? Like you said your dad was Catholic, I think.
Um, yeah, his family not not the most fond of some of them. Very Catholic. I mean, not a lot of them are around anymore, and honestly, like sorry, I know like, this is technically a little bit personal, I don't really associate with that side of the family anymore. Um,
Okay.
I don't really know what they are doing, I'm not really involved with that, but and then on my mom's side, most of them are not with us anymore either,
Mm,
so it's like there's yeah, but I'm pretty sure her family was, like, super chill with it. They weren't, like, the most religious, like,
okay.
Greek I don't even know if that's the right religion. Like, so my mother's side of the family, if you look at, like, Asia and put your finger in the middle of where Russia is on, like, the continent of Asia, like, that's where they're from. So not even,
Okay.
like, European Russia, they're, like, Asia Russia.
Yeah.
Not super religious, it's just kind of like, "Oh, everyone believes this and thinks this. Okay." Like, it
Yeah.
wasn't super, super religious for her, so I'm pretty sure her mom was like, yeah, whatever you want. Um, yeah, like Russian culture is very much, or at least from my family, it's very much do your own thing. I support you kind of vibes. Can't really
Cool.
say the
Yeah.
same thing with my dad, but yeah.
Um, I kind of want to get into like the actual like core beliefs of Judaism. Because I've heard different things. Like I've heard some people say you guys don't actually really believe in an afterlife or like heaven or hell.
No, yeah.
So
Well, interesting. I think it definitely depends. Sorry, actually, I'll let you continue. I feel like you have
no,
more
no,
info,
no.
but
Go for it.
yeah. So my answer to this will be based on what I was taught. Now, that could be different for because I did not grow up in Reform Judaism or Orthodox Judaism, but this is something that I was always taught, and I would ask many questions on as a child because I was encouraged to. um, so the belief with Judaism, there's not really a hell. So like there is a heaven. Um, it's very like from my experience with talking with like my rabbi, it was very um different experience for everyone, I guess. It just kind of depends. I guess like how many family members, who would you like to it's not like your traditional like Christian version of heaven, but it's like your spirit kind of joining in with like the eternal light and like everyone's kind of like it's very abstract. It's not like I've never gotten like a concrete thing of it, but it's definitely like no pain, you are
Mm,
at peace, you kind of have closure, like that kind of vibes, right?
yeah.
But then that goes into like, okay, well, like who can go? Then like if what if you're like a bad person, like just the typical questions of like, okay, like does everyone go there? So this is really interesting. Um, like I said, this is based on what I was taught. It may not be the same for all Jewish people, but Um, for every sin, like, you can be forgiven, and there's a lot of in-depth of, like, what is a sin? How bad of a sin is it? Kind of thing. They all can be forgiven, but you have to ask, and you have to really mean it. So that's the
Mm.
belief of, like, you have to seek forgiveness, and there's a holiday for Jewish people every year. Um, oh my gosh, I'm blanking on the name. It's in Hebrew. It starts with a T. I'm so embarrassed. I should know it. But anyways, so you go to the river, and you basically it's just a conversation between you and God. And every year you kind of like talk about your previous year, anything that you have. It's for you to confess your sins, and for every sin that you are wanting to be forgiven for, you have to like really mean it in your heart. And like we're always told, like, God can tell if you don't actually mean it, kind of thing. So it's like you have to either seek forgiveness or like seek to understand why you should be forgiven. And then, like I said, for every sin, you like cast a piece of bread into the water, and then when you get to the technical side of it, for every sin, it takes God like 7 years to forgive, kind of
Mm.
thing. So you're supposed to continuously through your life, you know, be living in a way that you do not need to ask for forgiveness. But if you do, like, it's okay. God will take anyone, and like if you really actually mean it, they will forgive you. Um, But let's say, so the question is like, okay, what if someone goes their whole life and they don't ask for forgiveness or anything? So this is where it gets like kind of weird with the whole like afterlife. It's not like hell. It's also not, oh, what's it called? Purgatory. So it's not
Mm.
necessarily that either. So when you die, if you haven't asked for forgiveness, you're like, you are gonna go before God, and like he's going to be judging you, and he's gonna like, sorry, this is like really bad way of like I said, I'm not the most well spoken. It's also been a while since I've thought about this. So he kind of like would go over your life and be like, that you've done this, you were a bad person
Mm.
here. And like we're also taught that God can tell the difference between like accidents and like me going out of my way to like, like if I accidentally like hit a bird with my car or like stab someone, those are different things of like
Right.
ending a life. So if it is really bad things and like you are supposed to be judged for it, you're then presented with the opportunity again, and like for asking for forgiveness. But now that you've like passed on and you're not alive anymore, you're supposed to be like a little bit more enlightened, and you can see how something was bad. Let's say if you grew up in a really, really bad life, all you've known is anger and pain and violence and stuff, like your judgment is clouded because you're used to that. But if you've died and like gone to this space where you're now being judged, you're now kind of like more enlightened, and you're able to see from like an objective view of like why that is bad, and like you will get the knowledge to see how your actions have hurt somebody or how they were not wrong. And then that's when you will feel the pain, if you haven't already, and the remorse of like, oh, I hurt someone in this way, or oh, I did this thing
Yeah.
and this was really, really bad. And then after that, it's like, okay, do you want to be forgiven? And so at that point, if you are able to feel all those things, the belief is like, if you're in that pain and you're realizing the pain that you've caused, then you're going to ask for forgiveness, duh, because you're at that point, and it's like,
You're
oh my gosh,
remorseful.
yeah, it's like you're reflecting on everything. And then again, there's the 7, like for every sin, 7 years. So then you would be waiting in that space for
Mm.
however long, however many years. And then after that, while you're feeling that like remorse for what you've done, then you're able to move on. So it's like, even if someone was a really bad person, um, there's obviously people can choose to be bad. People can be born into situations where they're not taught anything better. There's a million reasons why people would, in Judaism, quote, like, would do bad things and sin. But once we're in that space, we are kind of given the gift of like knowledge and like understanding of like someone else's perspective, if we didn't get that already, and just kind of able to reflect on it. Does that make sense? Sorry, that was a really
Yeah.
long explanation.
No, that was so basically, if I'm getting it right, it kind of like it seems like there is kind of a hell, but it's not like hellfire like burning.
Yeah,
But like,
it's
and it's
kind of
also not
well known.
It's
It's you
what?
alone with your thoughts, basically.
Yeah, yeah. And it sounds like it's also not eternal. It's like it could be a
No.
really, really long time, but
Yeah.
but it's not eternal. And honestly, that's one of the things like as me being an atheist and whatnot, thinking about God and existing and everything, that's one of the things I always was like, there that makes absolutely no sense to be eternally punished for a finite crime here on Earth. Like,
Yeah, exactly.
so yeah, that
Because it's like, we are definitely taught that, like, God is understanding, and, we are, we're just like another animal here. Like the cat does not understand that, like, when it's killing a mouse, it's like could be taking away like a family member from like another animal. Like, you know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah,
It's like our perspectives are always super limited based on like how like our knowledge. Like the fish does not know about the land and the air above it. It's like we as humans, we don't understand things, and like that's where it kind of gets into like weird spiritual stuff and like weird
yeah.
beliefs with like Jewish mysticism is like, okay, well, um, what is beyond the limits of like our beliefs, and like it gets into a bunch of cool stuff. But yeah, so there's not really this overlying fear of like, oh, I need to be following these people and act this way. Like, I mean, obviously no one wants to sit alone with their thoughts for like 100 years, so like be a good person, but like
Right.
um, in the end we'll all be granted that knowledge and like understanding of our actions, and like at least that's the belief, regardless.
It's more like, be good for the sake of being good. And
Yeah,
that's where
exactly.
I'm
Not
at,
not for fun. Yeah.
I can definitely see how Judaism is actually is possibly and can be a bridge between religious society and secular society, and
Mm,
because I really see a lot of secularism even in your conservative version, honestly.
yeah.
So I want to ask one more question about the beliefs, and it may even lead into a little bit of your other spiritual beliefs.
Yeah. I'm super ready to talk about that
Yeah,
by the way.
I know. Sorry, I like I said, I'm just ignorant about this, and it's
No,
nice to
no,
be
you're
able to
good.
learn about it. Um,
You're all good. I'm in no rush at all.
so I'm just curious because like I've read the Bible, the Old Testament, and stuff, and it seems like the ancient Hebrews were constantly dealing with like basically paganism. They kept worshiping multiple gods, and God like kept coming back to him and say, "Hey, those are false," like all that type of stuff. So
Yes.
I'm curious if like for yourself personally and for the tradition, is there like more than one God, or is it just one God, maybe multiple
Yeah.
entities of some sort?
So there's definitely like the acknowledgement of other entities. I think in Judaism, the perspective of God is like this is the actual like creation God, but like it gets really really complicated and weird when you go into the okay, well, where did he come from?
Right.
And then like who are all of these other beings that like are doing these things, like like what's going on. And so are you familiar with the like Jewish mysticism or the Kabbalah?
No,
Okay, well, that's a whole I'm gonna
I
like
was
try to
actually
not
going to
get into
ask about the Kabbalah. I wrote that down. So,
so there's it's interesting. I wasn't taught a whole lot from like a conservative Judaism's perspective on that. Um, from my understanding, the whole like other gods and everything, it's more of like a these other entities do not necessarily have your interest, and they like are your best interest in mind. Like they can lie to you. They can lead you down paths of like all this other stuff. And it wasn't necessarily, from my understanding, like I said, like meant to limit them, but it's more of like a hey, if like I'm trying to watch over you and trying to direct you in the right path and help you guys evolve and do good. So follow me, kind of thing. So that's kind of where my beliefs tend to split off from, um, I guess, the Jewish beliefs, because I don't know a whole lot about the beliefs of other gods and entities. What I do know is my experiences in this lifetime and the experiences of others and the research of other pagan beliefs and like the existence of these other entities and stuff. When you get into paganism, it definitely depends on like if it's Norse pagan, Slavic pagan, like there's different types of that. The gods that they're kind of like, they're not necessarily praying to them, and they don't even really see them as creationist gods. It's more of like personifications of aspects of life.
Yeah.
And we see that a little bit with the Kabbalah and the Tree of Life. Um, it's kind of like a lot of these other religions just found the building blocks of like the universe and like nature and everything, and like personified them into these beings. And it was more just kind of like a way to, from my understanding and my reading of other of these beliefs and stuff, it's like giving them like a character so you can like thank them, because it's like, imagine if you're like, the seasons are happening, your crops are growing, and you're like, I don't know who directly to thank, like I feel like there's multiple things at work. So the harvest god being thing, whoever you are, that are all tied together in this cosmic energy, like thank you. It's like, it's not necessarily like, oh, you created me kind of thing. It's like, oh,
Right.
thank you for this. So it's really interesting. I also believe in a sense of reincarnation, which is not necessarily the most Jewish thing to believe in.
Yeah.
But the reason I believe in that is because of my experience with spirits and ghosts and shit like that. Because, like, sorry, I don't know if
No,
I cuss on.
you can say whatever as long as it's
Okay.
TOS safe.
Sorry. But yeah, like, I just, I've experienced and seen so much that, like, don't align with, I guess, the belief of like, oh, you're here one time and then you're gonna join. Well, I guess it kind of does. I don't know. It's complicated. Sorry. I feel like I'm trailing off here, and I feel like I'm not directly answering your question.
No, no, you did, because I mean, it makes sense. You probably don't know exactly what the tradition thinks there, but I think you
Yeah.
explained how you view it, and that's I think that's something a lot of people don't realize about paganism, is that not all of them, like I've even heard of atheist pagans who simply just want to personify, anthropomorphize certain virtues and values. Like I've even heard someone say Lady Liberty in our country is basically kind of like a pagan god about freedom and
Yeah,
liberty. So
it's that's like a perfect example of like the quote like pagan gods. It's just like it's a personification of like a a fundamental like, you know what I mean? Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
So are there any gods or beings or whatever in specific that you like pray to or do anything like that with?
Um, no, I'm definitely, that's something that I'm wanting to explore more. I don't really, I don't even necessarily like pray or answer to God. I kind of look at it. I'm a like the universe person. I'm like, oh,
Hmm.
thank you, universe. Like, or it's, the terminology I used would definitely be like one that like an agnostic person would use, where it's like, I don't really know who's there or who's in charge or what's going on, but I appreciate you, like whoever you are.
Yeah.
So I definitely have a view of like, I'm very aligned and in tune with nature, and I believe in, oh, I don't want to start getting into astrology and stuff. It's so funny. But like I believe in so many things that it's just kind of like I don't even know how to describe that.
Well,
Um I don't really like pray to anyone. I just kind of,
okay.
I take things as they are. I am very open-minded. I am definitely in a state of like always learning,
Right.
and um yeah, I believe things happen for a reason. Some things are up to us because we have free will. Gosh, there's a lot of different ways I can go with that.
So
That's
it
why it's so funny when Azari was asking me about, kind of like what I call myself. It's like, I don't even I don't even have an answer for that one because it's like I'm not like technically I practice some like I guess some weird spooky stuff that you could say like,
yeah.
"Oh, she's a witch." But it's like I don't like that title because it's like I'm not the most educated on that. Sorry. I'll let you say something.
No, that's funny. I actually really like that title, but I understand the hesitation. Um, I actually when I fell away from my faith, like in college and stuff, I went through quite a few years phase of a lot of the same type of stuff. I don't know if like new age spiritualism like
Oh
sounds
god.
offensive or anything, but like it kind of seems at least that's what I was really into. And um
It's a really, um, good way to, like, ease into spirituality, like, I don't agree with new age spiritual stuff because there's actually, like, unfortunately, a lot of anti-Semitic stuff in new age
mm,
spirituality. And there's also a lot of ignorance of where the beliefs come from, and I think a really important thing of, like, what you're practicing, you should be, acknowledging kind of, like, its roots and where it comes from, and so a lot of New Age spirituality, definitely, like, cherry picks certain
yeah,
things to, like, really focus on, but then, like, won't really go in depth about the other aspects of it, and,
there's a
like,
lot of
Wicca.
charlatans too. I feel like
Yeah.
just frauds who are selling things. And
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and it's just, like it's unfortunate because it takes advantage of people's, um, fears of mental illness. I don't know if you've ever heard of, like, the starseed bullshit and, do you know what I'm talking about?
no, I haven't heard that.
Oh my god. This sucks, dude, like, I have seen people go into full on psychosis from this stuff. So, like, there's new age spiritualists that will, like, convince people that they don't need to take their, like, prescribed medication for either their, like, literal health problems or they have severe mental health problems that they do need their medication for. Because 'cause they're
Right.
like, "Oh, you don't need that, you just need to go and lay in the grass," and there's, like,
Yeah.
toxic positivity and stuff, and I've seen people and, like, even people that are close to me really fall in that and go into some really dark places and like psychosis is no joke and like that's a lot of times where we see these really intense extremists, it all starts from stuff like
Yeah.
that. Like the echo chambers of new age spirituality can be very dangerous and that's why I tend to turn to the more traditional um like belief systems that have a lot of backing and a lot of years of being practiced and observed because they're very they check themselves for sure. Like the occult is an interesting rabbit hole to go down. Um, tarot and astrology, divination practices are something that have been used for thousands and thousands of years that actually have a lot of close ties to Judaism. And
Mm,
there's different spiritual practices that you can do that kind of steer away from new age spiritual stuff. And like it's not inherently bad. It's just you can take it in a very bad
yeah.
direction. I've
Well, and
seen it happen.
I'm an example of it too. I don't think it was all just because of my spiritual beliefs, but I definitely fell into a deep like paranoia about the world and people around me. And
Yeah.
it yeah, it was a dark time for me. Um it, but I am curious cuz like I wonder why or what your opinion would be on why someone like me can't seem to have a supernatural experience. Because like do I want it too much? Cuz like I'll tell you, I've gone through years and years of trying all sorts of different, like not like obviously my religious was the beginning of it, and I never felt like I was getting my prayers answered, and that was like the start of my downfall, I guess. um But yeah, like I
Yeah.
would do all sorts of like crystal meditation. Like I would try to pray
Wow.
to angels, like Archangel Michael and stuff like that. Um, I there was even
So
one time I prayed to Satan. I was like, send a demon. I want to see something.
oh, that's so interesting. I mean, oh, it's so different for people. Like, so I've had a lot of experiences with the supernatural side of things, and I really genuinely attribute this to like a little bit about, I guess, my practice as a child. I've been meditating since I was, like, a little kid. I
Mm,
have been able to lucid dream as a child. I've been able to, like, I was astral projecting before I knew what astral projecting was, kind of, like,
wow.
super weird. Like, it I don't know if it was just I don't wanna, like, credit all the herbalism and stuff that, like, my mom would, like I don't know. I it's so weird because it's, like, my experience is very different from a lot of other people, but
Yeah.
I've always been very in tuned with myself and then, like, just the spiritual realm. Even before I knew what ghosts and, like, things were, I would just be, like, experiencing them and seeing them and, like, interacting with them as a kid. So, like, I don't know if I just, like, genuinely have, like, really heightened senses to all that stuff, and I mean, it's not, like, perfect, like, I can't just, like, go to someone's house and be like, "Oh, yeah, you have a freaking ghost in your closet," like,
Yeah.
there's there's been a lot of stuff that I've missed, and that has caused certain attachments. I mean, I've had a negative entity attached to me for years, and I mean, that came from, like, an abusive family member and just an unlucky string of, like, having old, um, items in my household that belong to people
Yeah.
and just a lot of stuff, but I would say I because I've been at a time where I was really connected to that, and then I became really disconnected for a long time, and I stopped having those experiences. And I what really brought me back in to kind of allow myself to experience that kind of thing, not only just on a supernatural end, but like using it to like understand the world around me, was when I did kind of start to dabble in like I don't wanna say, like I don't wanna say witchcraft, but that's not the right word. Um, I started going back to, like, a lot of mindfulness and a lot of, exercises to, like, get in tuned with, like, my intuition and my gut, and, like, I spent a lot of time in nature, and I was just really mindful and not kind of forcing anything, basically, like, I was using, different spiritual tools and stuff and, like, just trying to reconnect with myself and my guides first. So, like, I believe in spirit guides, I believe in
Yeah.
people that watch over you and stuff, and, the first step for me was kind of getting in connection with them, and then from there, everything just felt a lot easier, and it was just kind of getting back into that zone, and, it's something you definitely have to work on being in that mentality, because the more that you forget and you stop practicing, the less kind of connected to all that you feel. So
Yeah.
it's definitely, um, I don't know, like, I it's different for everyone because I've had 2 close friends, that were raised actually Mormon because I met them, you know, in Utah,
Yeah.
that I met when I was, like, around 19, 20, that I introduced to all this stuff, and they had never really experienced a lot of stuff, but then once they started practicing with me and we were doing a lot of these, um, I guess, mindfulness and practices to get connected with that, then they started having those experiences as well. Um, and I don't know, it's definitely different for everyone.
Well, maybe you'll find a piece of my story here interesting because,
Yeah.
um, well, and right off the bat, just like you talking about like an evil entity kind of being attached to you, um, that's actually something I utilize almost in like a metaphorical way because I understand like what that really means, like whether it's actually a being or not, it is this like essence of something weighing me down
Yeah.
because of something I've been through. And so it's kind of cool to look at it that way. For me, metaphorically, it helps me to release those demons and, you know, move on past that.
Hmm.
um but yeah, I think I agree. Like, obviously now I don't experience anything like that because I have all the way disconnected from any sort of spiritual stuff.
Yeah.
Um and this
And that's
is oh, go ahead.
oh, it's really interesting that you know, when you disconnect yourself from all aspects of it, you stop interacting with it. This is a huge reason why, like, people will advocate for like staying away from practicing that stuff because it's
Mm,
like, oh, if you start getting into like all of the like cool weird stuff of it, you're gonna end up interacting with like the weird dark stuff of it. So it's like people just have the mindset of like, oh, just stay away from it, you'll be good. When in reality, like as long as you are just safe and smart and educated with those practices, then you won't deal with the
yeah, the
stuff
bad.
and that can follow and everything.
Right.
So like it is a good like it's good that most people are cautious of these things because then a lot of people would run into some really bad teachings and advice and then they would find themselves um like stuck with like negative spirits and like bad entities and stuff because like any spiritual practice at all energies are like energy work is insane, like the amount of energy that we have just with our thoughts can influence the energies of like things around us, and like belief is a powerful thing. So sorry,
Mm.
before I start telling that, I'm gonna let you get back to what you're telling me because I have something I want to talk about for sure,
Yeah,
but
no, it definitely can be scary. And you know, if all of this is real, I'm I consider myself pretty lucky because, like I told you before, I was literally praying to the devil and the evilest thing because I so badly wanted to experience something.
it's
You know,
funny because sometimes if we want it bad enough, we won't even like there you can definitely like seek it too much, and then it's like you're not even like touching it because you're not able to focus on where it actually is. It's an interesting um
well, and you know, I think that, like, if all of this, like, if there really are spirit guides who follow me and stuff, right? I almost feel like their message to me was to let go and focus on your life. Like,
oh yeah.
and that
I've run
was
into
like my whole lesson, I guess.
yeah, I do believe that there are people that no matter how hard they try, they may never really get into direct contact with their spirit guides because just their level of understanding of like life and like what they're supposed to be doing in their life and stuff, it just doesn't align with like directly speaking to their guides. So they're just like not going to say anything to you. That doesn't mean that you can't ever contact them, but um, it's really different for a lot of people. Like I've met people and I've immediately gotten reads off of like their guides and like felt the presences of them. But it's really funny because sometimes when I'll meet people, I'll see those things or I'll feel them, and they're like really strong and really present, but they're also kind of like I get the energy of like, don't tell them, don't mention
Don't bring
anything.
it
I'm
up.
here, but like, don't say anything.
Yeah.
So like I won't. I'll always respect that. Um, with Azari, I've come into contact with it a couple times and gotten that same reaction from the hold on. So it's interesting. He's looking at me right now, like, what the heck?
Well,
But
I've also told like a Christian this before. I talked to him on the show, and because he told me how before he got baptized and was reborn again, he was drinking a lot of alcohol, watching a lot of porn, like all this stuff. And like the Jesus change is what like changed his life completely. And so I told him, and like it same goes for kind of what I'm saying to you right now. As soon like I dealt with a lot of that myself, and as soon as I kind of like let go of this like obsession to figure out what the hell's going on around here, that's like immediately when my life became better. Like it's
Mhm.
just suddenly I finally felt like I actually was the operator of my own vehicle, and I
Wow.
wasn't, you know, relying on whatever this and that.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I was when I first kind of went through my um really hardcore, I don't want to say like spiritual awakening because like dear God, I've had like I feel like a million in my lifetime. Like I've just it's always something new. Every once in a while I'll just get more connected or fall away and then come back to it. But a really big time in my life that was like super exploratory with all of this was when I first left my hometown. I moved across country and I was in a city. I didn't really know anyone, and I spent a lot of my time in nature. I genuinely believe that if I did not get that in tune with my guides and like learning all of these practices and stuff, I would not have made it through the stuff I was about to run into. So I had a really good time for about 6 or 8 months, I want to say. And then I had some very, very heavy, severe, intense things happen to me that I don't think I would have made it out alive. I honestly, like, if I didn't have the spiritual beliefs and the just the practices that I was doing to keep myself happy, because I've gone through a lot in my life, and that helped me get through the really bad that was following. And then when I kind of took a chill on my practices and kind of focused on my life, it was like at the perfect timing to then kind of build myself back up, get myself back into a place where I was able to kind of do that freely. And now I'm in the best position I've ever like been in my life, like both
Yeah.
financially, mentally. I'm in a safe place, and like I wouldn't have been here if I didn't kind of dive deep into this world at the time that I did. It's just crazy. Like really, not everything happens for a reason. A lot of things do. I still believe in the free will of people to alter things that are supposed to happen, but yeah.
Well, I will say, like, I don't know if I would take it as far as to say that, like, you know, I just think everything happens for a reason, but I do think timing is like up there close to supernatural for me, because it seems like the good and the bad that I have seen and experienced in my life, it always just seemed like that was the time for that to happen. I don't know
Yeah.
why, but it just seemed right, even if it was wrong. Um,
You know, I know that there was we talked about before this the possibility of doing a reading, and I can't do it when I'm like not in person, but
right.
if you're interested, I
I would love
definitely
to. Yeah.
I really feel like I don't know. I just feel like right now I don't want to say like you need one or something, but like you would really benefit from one.
No, I
Actu-
absolutely would love to. I'm open to everything. Like, honestly, I'm like still really reading religious books all the time, like different religions, and like I know it seems like a lot of atheists are just super closed off to like all of it, but I don't think
okay,
it's fair for anyone to be closed off to anything.
yeah, and I'm not gonna expect you to like oh my god, I believe in every tarot reading or like there's
Right.
multiple different ways you can do a reading and stuff. I'm not expecting anything. I feel like there's some information that could come through that would really not like help you, but just stuff that you should, I guess,
Well,
hear.
I've
Uh,
actually heard of like an atheist who does it in a secular way. Basically, the way she explained how she does it is like she just looks at the cards as a different perspective about her life that she might not have thought about, and you know, whatever she's drawing
oh,
and
yeah,
stuff.
I know people that do read that as well, and I think that's also a perfectly fine and awesome way to use cards and stuff. But that divination is it's different for everyone, and it does not have to be a religious or spiritual thing. It can just be something that you use to bring attention to aspects of your life that you wouldn't have if you didn't sit down and like try to do a reading, you know?
Yeah. Well, I want to be respectful of your time. I did want to just say, kind of to tie a nice little bow on everything we've been talking about. Um, I kind of went through a atheist phase of like, I need to deconvert everyone I talk to, and like kind of like an evangelical Christian. And
Yeah.
I started to realize, like, like people like my mom, like the Mormon church like that does so much for her life. I actually would never want her to deconvert because I know I've been through it. Like deconversion is hard. Like it's
Oh yeah.
sad. It's a sad time, and I don't want people to feel that. And I just wanted to say, from what you've taught me, like I really respect the Jewish teachings because it seems so humanistic to like everyone gets to worship or not worship however they want. Like we're just here to treat each other correctly, and
Yeah.
that's like exactly where I'm at. So
Yeah, no, for sure. Like, and I was really, really involved with like the like Jewish culture and beliefs and teaching. I wasn't someone who just like popped in every once in a while. Like, I genuinely was so immersed in that, and like the fact that that was like one of the biggest takeaways. Like, I always advocate like Judaism's a really awesome religion. I'm not gonna push it on anyone, but if someone needs something to be a part of, like, I always recommend it because it's such a beautiful, open-minded, from my experience,
yeah,
way of life. And yeah, for sure. I appreciate that, by the way.
yeah. Well, I just had no idea. So that's you got to find your allies where you can find them.
Hmm.
And
Yeah, and a lot of people when they are going through kind of like deconversion, I think that's the word you said.
yeah,
Um, it's I think people don't give themselves enough credit for kind of going through that because what's interesting is um, it really can be a form of trauma, and
mm-hmm,
it is a really, really intense thing because trauma is not something that's gauged by how bad the action or something happened to you. It's by how world shattering um, that thing was. Like if you've never experienced anything bad and then you get something bad happens to you, like that's extremely traumatic because in relation to your life, it's like it is challenging your perception of the world and like your belief system. And so coming out of a religion is extremely world shattering. So therefore
yeah,
it is extremely traumatic and like it's a really hard thing. And I think people can definitely take that a lot of different ways, either go through a phase where they are hateful because like I said, for a few years I even like kind of like walked away from Judaism because of all the stuff that I was going through, and it was really hard for me because I wasn't super aware of like the beliefs of like do things happen for a reason, all that kind of stuff, and I was having a lot of bad things happen to me, so I kind of lost my faith. I was like, wow, this really sucks, no one's watching out for me. But um coming out of that and re-finding my spirituality and stuff, realizing that like, oh, people still have free will and like people can do bad things and that's not the fault of like some being. But anyways, sorry, what I'm trying to get at is like um it it is really hard kind of finding where your beliefs lie and like getting in your head of like, oh, but I don't want to believe the wrong thing. But ultimately, really love that Judaism is very much like your own personal journey. You do your
yeah,
thing, and yeah,
yeah. And it makes sense how they have like a secular version of it because you know, I think religious freedom needs to be extended to non-religious people too. And so
yeah,
society is like the most neutral we can be, where everyone can
mhm,
just decide what they want to worship and stuff.
yeah. Like I've literally never met a Jewish person that will like go around and start being like, you need to be Jewish. We are the like
Right.
I there's no like the converting people is just like not a thing that like I
Yeah.
yeah, it's it's so awesome like how much respect there is for people that are just different and like don't believe that. There's no like we're looking down on you. It's more just like, oh yeah, you believe that, you do that, that's
Mm-hmm.
cool. Know about what I believe, I'll absolutely tell you, but other than that, do your thing. And it's just very respectful.
It's actually pretty funny. I heard a guy on the internet talk about his story, and he said one time he wanted to convert to Judaism, and he didn't realize how hard it actually is. Like the first rabbi he went to was like, are you sure you want to do this?" And he was like, "But do you not want me?" Like, I don't know. It's funny.
No, it's crazy. Do you know the process? Sorry, I know we're trying to like wrap it up here, but do you know like the conversion process?
No, I don't.
So you have to study with a rabbi for a year. I'm not like every day, but I think it's like at least once a week you like spend time. And then after that year, they have to decide if you're like ready or not. And then you have to go into a mikvah, which is like a sacred water bath kind of thing. It's not like baptism. It's different places have different versions of it. You can either go to like a natural one or like one that's like made like a pool kind of thing. And like there's like a whole ceremony and like it's definitely like kind of intense. So it's like it's honestly
Hmm.
it's pretty hard to like get into it.
Yeah.
So it's interesting.
Well, I don't know if you like have any social media or anything that you care to shout out, but
Uh,
feel free
I
to do so.
personally, it's okay. I keep pretty private on that end, but thank you.
Cool.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for coming on. That's been an awesome discussion.
Of course, for sure. Sorry if I've been talking for too long or
No,
anything.
like I said at the beginning, I was like, I want to listen to you talk, so that was perfect.
Mhm.
All
All right.
right. Well, you have a good day. Thanks again.
You too.